February 7th, dawn. Grey, freezing. Soldiers from the 174th Field Artillery stand at a concrete door in the Siegfried Line, a door engineered never to open from the outside. A corporal jams a pry bar into twisted steel. The door groans. Inside, 6 German bodies in a small room. A 155mm shell punched through yesterday and detonated. Paint charred black. Ceiling crumbling white dust. The air smells like cordite and death. For a moment, nobody moves. Then someone mutters, "Mark it, move on." There's more. This bunker was supposed to be impenetrable. The Siegfried Line, Hitler's concrete wall, hundreds of miles of interlocking fortifications had stopped every Allied assault for months. But 24 hours ago, an ugly, forgotten machine changed everything. The M12, a clunky, roofless metal box built around a World War I French gun sitting at the back of the motor pool collecting dust. Nobody wanted it. The kind of desperate equipment you're embarrassed to use. Yesterday afternoon, Private Ralph Fiore turned the key on this relic and drove it straight at Germany's most fortified line. What happened in the next 18 minutes cracked the Siegfried open. It's February 6th, just past 1 in the afternoon. Private First Class Ralph Fiore sits in the driver's seat of the M12, skinny under his winter gear, hands cracked raw from cold fuel and half-frozen grease. The gun idles underneath him with a deep rumble that runs through the whole hull. Behind the gun sits a metal spade, ready to dig in. Captain Huggins climbs onto the side and leans toward the windscreen. The smell of damp wool and gasoline mixes in the cold air. They're racing the clock. The Germans can set up counter-battery fire, but it takes time. That window won't stay open long. 2 things will decide if anyone walks away from this: how fast they get into position, and whether those first shots do what they're supposed to do. Fiore steers through a gap between Dragon's teeth, concrete pyramids covered in meltwater. White tape marks the safe lane on both sides. Machine gun positions up ahead will give them some cover. He keeps the engine in a lower gear than feels right to avoid getting bogged down in the mud. There's a mine warning sign leaning to the side, already half buried. Someone ahead waves them down, the hand signal for slower. Fiore's breath fogs the windscreen. He wipes it with his sleeve and gets a face full of wet canvas smell. They break into a small clearing. Yesterday's recon team marked this spot on the map. That's their target. A squat concrete bunker with an opening cut into it like a mail slot. The ground around it is shallow and muddy. Huggins jumps down and studies it the way someone does when they know how to read land. "Back her in," he says quietly, spade down. Fiore throws it in reverse. The M12 feels massive going backward, like steering a building. The crew in back hang onto the barrel breech and brace their feet wherever they can find purchase. One of them is grinning. That kind of grin you get when you know the next 15 minutes are going to matter. The spade drops and hits dirt with a clank. The whole machine settles, rear end digging in like a dog. Metal bites soil. The crew chief starts calling out wind speed, distance, target details. Huggins checks his watch and says it loud enough for everyone to hear: 13:22. If the Germans are fast, counterfire starts at 13:40. That gives them 18 minutes. A 155mm high-explosive shell with a delayed fuse is built to punch through before it explodes. All fall, crews like this have been figuring out how much powder is too much at close range, how little is a waste. Now they trust those settings. Enough speed to bite into concrete, just enough delay for it to go off inside where it counts. From the moment they fire that first shot until the Germans start firing back, maybe 20 to 30 minutes. Every single minute of that window belongs to someone making a call. Huggins nods, and the gun crew goes into their routine, fast and smooth from doing it 100 times. Powder bag first. Then the shell. The breech slams shut, the loader's shoulders braced against the metal, then relaxing when the block locks home with a solid click. The gunner doesn't look away from the sight picture, a dark circle with the concrete slot right in the middle, shaking slightly. "On," he says. One word. That's it. Now the gun is pointed at a specific piece of concrete maybe 200 yards away. Could be 500, might be over 1,000. At this range, they might not even raise the barrel above the edge, staying hidden while they work. The whole point is staying alive long enough for that delayed explosion to do its job. The first shot goes off and everyone's teeth rattle. The recoil slams the cradle back, and that spade is suddenly worth its weight in gold. Without it, the whole machine would jump and slide in the mud. Fiore feels it through the steering handles. Huggins raises his binoculars and waits, the way someone waits when they've learned not to blink at moments like this. Smoke and dust cloud up around that slot in the concrete. The crew reloads, faster this time. Now they're just talking numbers, range, angle, fuse timing, propellant charge. Huggins looks through the binoculars again and says, flat and calm, low and left. That's the correction. That's the small change in angle that separates a story people tell from one nobody ever hears because it went wrong. Huggins wants the next round to go in low, ideally under that slot if possible, so when the fuse detonates, all that force goes into the room on the other side. The gun fires again. Fiore feels the kick. Through the binoculars, the concrete face splits open with dust, then a darker column of smoke shoots right out of it. The crew in back keeps scanning the horizon, listening. They're waiting for that dull, far-off rumble that means the German clock just started ticking. They work through a few more bunkers before that ridge starts talking back. It starts soft, just a couple of long-range rounds that sail past and hit behind them. Then it walks toward them, closer each time. Somewhere over there, a German battery is finding the range. Huggins lifts his hand and says, let's move. The spade comes up wet and heavy. Fiore drops a gear and noses back through that same lane. No shortcuts because any detour means danger. The first German round that lands close hits hard enough they feel it more than hear it. Fiore's knuckles go white on the steering levers. The window is closing. But the door they came to kick in? It's cracked open now. By late afternoon, the guns will be gone, set up somewhere else entirely. The infantry will be moving in. Those first 30 minutes turned an old piece of hardware into something that mattered, something key to the whole operation. It's late September 1944, and those first cold nights are rolling in before the autumn rains hit. A battalion staff spreads a map across a vehicle hood about 30 miles behind the front lines. They mark it up with a grease pencil, coordinates in square after square after square. By the time they're done, they've circled roughly 50 targets. The order comes down simple: destroy them. Not suppress, not harass, destroy. Here's the thing about pillboxes, those concrete bunkers dug into the ground. At these distances, hitting them isn't really about lining up a shot through the gun sight. It's about getting your shell there fast enough to punch through, then let it do its work inside. The concrete doesn't care how you aimed it. What matters is that the shell gets in there before the fuse burns out. The work crews labour in the damp air, digging out a shallow pit so the M12 can back in and anchor itself down. The exposed dirt gleams like graphite. From where you stand at the edge of that hole, you can't actually see the bunker, just the brush line hiding it. The forward observer sits on higher ground a couple hundred yards ahead, watching that gun embrasure slot through binoculars. His stopwatch ticks. When the first American gun fires, someone flips another stopwatch. If the enemy sticks to their usual pattern, they won't get their counterfire out in less than 20 minutes. So you hit the target, then move the gun and get out. By week's end, they've attacked about 40 of those 50 targets. Nearly all of them show signs that the shells got inside. And that's when the crews start learning something important. Sometimes using more gunpowder actually ruins the shot. When you crank up to supercharge at under 2,000 yards, the shell can crack before it even goes off. The casing explodes from the stress, and all that energy vents outside instead of inside the bunker. Switch to a normal charge, keep the speed just high enough to bite into that concrete, and the fuse does what it's supposed to do. It waits until the shell's already inside before it lets go. A pattern emerges. Dig the pit, back the gun in, drop the spade, fire 2 rounds fast to walk your shot to the right spot, aim low on the bunker's face, aim for a corner or the edge of that embrasure. Watch for the smoke puffing out of the slot. When you see that, you know you've punched through what looked impossible to crack. Then move the gun before the other side figures out where you're sitting. One crew wants to stay and fire a 3rd round at a particularly stubborn bunker. The section chief checks the map, checks the stopwatch, and says no. The gun wants to shoot. The men want to finish the job. But the math says move. By the time they're done with that list of targets, they've hit around 40 of the 50 bunkers. Nearly all of them show signs that the shells got inside at ranges between 2,200 and 5,500 yards. They've confirmed what matters. Get the shell inside before that tiny fuse delay burns out, then get out before the enemy's clock runs down. The goal isn't to smash the door, it's to blow the room. By the end of that week, the crews have their own set of rules. Find terrain where the gun's hull stays hidden and the range stays short if you can. Get the whole thing done in under 15 minutes so you've got time to move before they shoot back. Don't stick around for that third round just because you want to finish what you started. The concrete is tough, but time is tougher. February rolls around. Now the men from the 174th know what they're doing. When the gun is ready and that first round leaves the barrel, they move. No hesitation. It's February 11th, somewhere near Prüm. The ground's just starting to thaw, so every step you take leaves a mark, and water's pooling everywhere. Lieutenant Harry Brooks is behind the scope on a little rise. With him are Technician 5th Grade Thomas Neal and Private First Class Harold Andrews. Down below, tucked into whatever holes they've dug with shovels and pure stubbornness, is the second section under Sergeant Richard Sudbrink. An observation post is mostly ponchos and binoculars pressed so hard into your eyes that the circles ache. You listen for your own guns firing, then count heartbeats until you hear the impact. When you call out numbers, you try to sound like your chest isn't vibrating. When it works, it's almost routine. Shift right a little, come up, fire for effect. When it doesn't work, it falls apart fast, and it falls apart close. The morning's quiet. Brooks calls in a correction. The section below adjusts just enough to put the next round where the wall meets the opening. Neal watches it through his scope while Andrews writes it down, notes that'll probably become someone else's tactics in a few months. Then everything shifts. That first incoming mortar round is always confusing. You hear a distant cough, then somewhere else a thud. The second one teaches you where the first was supposed to hit. The third comes faster than you're ready for. Sudbrink's guys know how this goes. The easiest thing is to freeze and finish what you started. But the smart thing is harder. Stop what you're doing, check your watch, figure out how long you've been sitting in the same spot. If your stopwatch lines up with the incoming rounds, you move. Even if you're sure one more shot will do it. A round hits close enough to spray gravel across the poncho. Brooks flinches, pulls himself together, then decides, one more correction, then we're out of here. The next two rounds come too fast to really process. A hiss, a slap. Then a feeling in your leg that absolutely shouldn't feel like that. Andrew's voice goes thin and tight. Neal's already grabbing Brooks's jacket. Brooks says it flat and calm. I'm hit. A small hole becomes a big problem when you're on a slope in February. Getting him out means angles, down without silhouetting yourself, across without moving against the sky, up into cover without standing up when everything in you wants to run. Below the second section does the same thing. Reverse the gun, dig up, ease out, don't kill the engine when you're already in hell. They move because their watch and the enemy's watch are telling the same time. Two things matter on this ground. Mortars can walk rounds to your position in less time than it takes to drink water. Then there's the count nobody's supposed to keep, how many pillboxes they've cleared in this sector, and it hasn't reached the number that makes anyone feel safe yet. A week from now it'll feel like things are turning. Right now it feels like a bet that hasn't paid off. The observation post watches where rounds land and radios corrections. The gun section changes angle and traverse. The loader sets the fuse and loads the breech. Enemy mortars either use what they see landing or fire from landmarks they've been watching for months. Your silhouette on a forward position they've had their eyes on, you're not a man. You're a coordinate. The only answer is to move and time it right. They get Brooks out. He goes back along a path that'll freeze solid by morning. Someone else will lie behind that scope tomorrow. The second section sets up in another hole just like the last one. Different place, same setup. The pillboxes stay put. The men move. The enemy over there is sharp and they're fast. When Fiore and Huggins and Sudbrink slide into the next position and start running the numbers again, what keeps them alive is knowing exactly what they're dealing with. October 1944, Aachen. The street is lined with 3-story brick buildings, their plaster cracked and weathered. A church spire shows fresh scars from shelling. The air smells like wet lime and gunpowder mixed together. Lieutenant Louis Soffer watches as the M12 gun backs into what used to be someone's garden, now just a shallow hole. When the spade hits ground, dust rains down from the building above. Across the street, an apartment building has become a sniper's nest, with a machine gun positioned to cover the entire intersection. In a city, distances play tricks on you. 40 yards might look like 80. Something that seems safe could draw fire in seconds. The gun crew debates like engineers weighing physics and risk. If they crank up the powder charge, the shell's nose might collapse at this distance. Keep it normal and shallow though, and the fuse gets time to arm after impact. Soffer shows it with his hand, palm flat, the round coming in low and punching through that inside wall. The loader gets it and nods. The first shot tears plaster off the window and scatters glass everywhere. Not what they wanted, but close. The gunner makes a small adjustment, the street slopes, and the building's angle throws off their distance sense. The second round hits low on the ground floor and goes through. Smoke pours out, thick and black, with enough force that you feel it in your teeth. Infantry down the block radios coordinates. The crew packs up and moves. 2 minutes after that second shot, soldiers cross through a doorway that belonged to no one this morning. You can draw a straight line from the sound of the M12 firing to the sound of rifle fire and boots kicking open an upstairs door. Under 2,000 yards, stick with normal charge to keep the shell intact. Plan to be gone in under 15 minutes. Expect the enemy to answer back faster than they did yesterday, if they're worth anything. The men check their watches, scan the building, and they're already looking for the next garden to back into. The idea that an old open-topped gun with a barrel from World War I would actually work in city fighting? That dies the moment the smoke comes out wrong and the riflemen behind you start charging forward. Any jokes about this weapon stop being funny the instant it does what you asked it to do. The city controls what you feel by controlling what you can see and smell. Plaster dust coats your throat, chalky and bitter. If you taste it while you're still at the gun, you made the hit. Cordite alone means you left too soon or shot too high. The men across the street are still yelling at you to wait 1 more minute. Count it, the sergeant says as they're pulling out. The distance to the next spot, the ammo boxes, the minutes until the radio says the line's moving again. That open-topped gun makes a big target. Every time it fires in a narrow street like this, someone makes note of it. But they'll back into 1 more garden and do it all over again, because sometimes the only way to open a room is to break it from the inside. On February 21st, Captain Huggins wiped the chalkboard in the S3 tent and wrote new numbers. 62 pillboxes destroyed in their sector over the last 2 weeks. Next to it, an 88 taken out on one of them. The men on the line had been watching this ruthless machine back into positions and prove them wrong about what it could do. Outside, the engine idled with that heavy, satisfied rumble, the kind that made mess tins rattle if you left them on the fender. PFC Ralph Fiore was waiting for the next point on the map to become a job, for roads to turn into gun pits, for each spot to become a low shot that pushed smoke outward instead of in. 3 things mattered right then. There were only so many of these guns to go around, most of them patched and overworked. The ammunition dump sat 125 miles back, which explained why everything needed maintenance and why everyone looked beat. And the counter-battery window was still 20 to 30 minutes. That's why the chalkboard even existed. Inside the tent, the infantry officer pointed at the map. They were through enemy lines in 3 places already and about to break through in 2 more. The artillery guys nodded. Someone mentioned the roads were turning to mud with the thaw, and trucks needed 2.5 days just to make the trip back and forward. They asked where the next position should go and whether the ground was solid enough to dig in. The M12 was built for one thing: smash reinforced concrete from close enough that the shells could do their damage inside. But when the fighting moved past the fortified lines, into bridges, crossroads, and open country, a gun with no roof and thin armour that needed a dug-in position became the wrong tool for the job. The newer M40s could keep up with a faster war. Fire missions got longer. Those quick 20-minute windows turned into long waits with maps instead of fast runs with stopwatches. Guys used to count M12s sitting in scrap piles behind supply depots. Now they counted pillboxes in chalk and said the number out loud. Then they set the chalk down and looked up, because March was coming and the radio kept reporting units moving faster than anyone planned. Outside, Fiore wiped his hands. Huggins stepped out, tucked his pencil behind his ear, and said a place name. By nightfall, it would be a gun pit and another job. The engine note got deeper as Fiore let out the clutch. The gun headed out to find one more target. Then, almost overnight, after all that planning and waiting, the targets changed. March turned into April, and everything became rivers, roads, and speed. The gun that had made smoke pour out of concrete bunkers faded into the background. Crossing rivers and covering ground mattered now. The bunker they opened on the 7th was just concrete again. Somewhere, chalk dust sat on a board. Someone would clean it off to write tomorrow's number, and it wouldn't be pillboxes anymore.